Some people would say that the Founding Fathers never envisioned politicians, a career politician. You were a farmer, you were a lawyer, a merchant. You went and did your time, 1 or 2 terms, then you went back to what your career was. What do you describe yourself as? What is your occupation?
I'm a public servant. That's what I'm hired to do in this current job, and I tend to agree with the founders, and that's one reason 12 years is a long time. There's a lot of folks, a lot of supporters of mine saying, why don't you run for both jobs? You're likely to be unopposed, and you'll have a fallback. There'll be no risk. Run for the State House and run for the State Senate. I've never been a political opportunist. It's not about political opportunity. It's about public service. And 12 years is a long time to serve in the General Assembly, and I felt that that I had given 100% and all my passion into that job. And now there was the voters would have an opportunity to look at my record and say, is this the gentleman that we think should elect us in the State Senate? Does he have the record of accomplishment, a record of accountability that will serve us well? Does he have the experience to continue his success from the State House to the State Senate? So, I mean, that's one reason I introduced the legislation to create term limits on legislative leaders. Legislative leaders, their names are not as recognizable as the governor or the lieutenant governor or the treasurer, the auditor general, the attorney general. Their names often don't get to the front pages, but they're extraordinarily powerful in whether it's the budget debate or whether it's the general operations of the State House. And I was sitting one day when we were actually celebrating the Capitol that was built in 1906, and we're all on the stage, and they're recognizing the dignitaries, and they recognized one of the leaders over in the Senate who had been a leader in the Senate for 25 years. And I sat and I thought, how many governors had gone by? How many legislators have gone by? And that gentleman was always in the room and at the table, influenced. What accountability has he had from the public in respects other than winning his Senate seat or a State House seat? And I said there has to be a little bit more sunshine in that room in terms of when those leaders are at the table. And I felt there's a greater accountability. My bill would create an 8-year term limit, so you can be majority leader for 8 years. If you want to run for Speaker, you want to run for Appropriations Chair, you can do that, but you only get 8 years. That would create greater accountability. And I support a constitutional convention to put all those ideas on the table. We haven't had a comprehensive constitutional convention in over 100 years. I think it's high time that we look at modernizing state government, whether that's the functions of the General Assembly to reflect a modern era. A lot of those decisions on how the General Assembly operates were made well before computers, well before the technology advances that we have to create greater connectivity to the voters, so that voters can be informed. So I think that we should have a constitutional convention to look at all those ideas that have been put on the table to modernize government and to make government more accountable to the voters, more efficient in its operation. So I do kind of echo the founders in that we need to get back to the citizen public servant, and that I guess that's how I would look. I'm a citizen first of my community, and that's why I created the Yudichak Family Fund of the Luzerne Foundation. I'm citizen first. I could have waited till after my career, but that's you're a citizen first, and then you're a public servant second.
Do we need to decrease the size of the legislature?
It's a good issue, and a good issue that could be debated in the Constitutional Convention, and I would support that. We were a unicameral legislature at one time, and there were some states, Nebraska, that have a unicameral. I think that idea has some merit that needs to be vetted to a greater degree. I don't think there's any magic about having 253 members of the General Assembly. That is an issue that can be debated, and whether or not we've gotten too large. Again, technology There may have been a time where, you know, as a state representative representing 60,000 people, that's a sizable population, but there's still a great responsiveness. As a state senator representing 250,000 people, I think technology has improved that so that you can be in greater contact with that amount of people compared to where we were 100 years ago. So I think that you can have that discussion, and I'd be happy to have that discussion.
Are there particular reforms that you would champion after having been there for 12 years, things that you think this needs to be done?
Right. Well, the term limits on leaders. When we went through the Reform Commission after the 2005 pay raise, when reform was the flavor of the day, I went before the commission, and it was when I got to the root of it, I said, listen, this place is about power, and those that have power make the rules. If we have leaders who have no accountability to the caucus because they have the resources, I mean, there's over a $200 million surplus in the legislative leadership accounts, where, you know, human service funding at the county level is getting cut, and the legislative surplus, the leadership legislative surplus, is getting an increase. There's something wrong with that. There's no accountability. They're making those decisions in a vacuum. So I proposed the term limits on leaders, and I proposed putting it into the legislative surplus, driving that money out, back out into, and I have a bill that's been introduced. And I stood with Barry Kaufman, who representing Common Cause, a nonpartisan group, recently, in terms of those accountability measures. It's about being accountable for the dollars. Changing some of the things that we've done in terms of the operations of the legislature could be argued. Not going past 11 o'clock, not allowing 24 hours for they're all positive things. But it didn't get to the dollars. And I think being accountable for those leadership accounts, having term limits, per diem reform, which I introduced, in creating greater accountability, those are the kind of things that we got to get back to. And again, what I said earlier, before Mr. Connors came in, this crisis of confidence, you have to address that issue before you can get into the larger issues of creating jobs, improving schools, and creating safe neighborhoods. If you don't have the faith of the people of Pennsylvania, you're going to have a difficult job governing, and that's why those measures are so important to get them done. I mean, we've made some strides with the open records law, changing that for the first time in 50 years, and creating greater transparency. There's no better tonic for accountability than transparency. So I think we can do more on that. We passed just recently this year in this session the Pen Gap legislation that would create, by virtue of technology, an accessible website so that the public can gain access to the expenditures of the General Assembly, of state government, and it'll dovetail nicely with the open records law so that so the public and the press can see how dollars are being spent, to see if the General Assembly is being accountable for the tax dollars that we spend.